Hi guys, tonight we're not just telling a story, we're stepping straight into history, okay? Imagine traveling thousands of years back to the very heart of one of the most iconic civilizations humanity ever built, ancient Egypt. This is the land of towering pyramids that scrape against the desert, sky of mighty pharaohs who walked the earth as both kings and living gods, and of divine beings who, according to belief, watched over every single breath you took, every step you made, and every grain of sand that shifted beneath your feet. It's a place that has fascinated explorers, archaeologists, and dreamers for centuries. The shimmering gold masks, the hieroglyphs carved into stone, the vast temples that still rise from the desert, they all whisper of power, mystery, and an almost eternal grandeur. We imagine this world as a place of glory and majesty, filled with ritual, pageantry, and breathtaking beauty. But here's the truth. For the average person, life was far less glamorous. Beneath the sparkle of gold and the shadow of colossal monuments, its daily existence was a constant struggle against heat, hunger, exhaustion, and the unforgiving desert itself. And that's what we're here to uncover tonight. What would it actually feel like to spend just one day in ancient Egypt? Could you survive its relentless rhythm, or would the desert chew you up before the sun even set? Because here's the thing, the desert doesn't play nice. The sun wasn't just hot, it was merciless, a searing force that could finish you off before midday. The air wasn't tea, just dry. It stole the moisture from your skin and lips until you cracked. Your home, if you were like most people, was little more than a mud brick or reed hut with a straw mat on the floor. Privacy, comfort, luxury. Those were things reserved for pharaohs and high priests, not for the common farmer, laborer, or servant. For you, each day was a test of endurance. And while the gods may have been watching, Ra, Osiris, Isis, Keda, and the countless others, they weren't exactly handing out sunscreen, wide-brimmed hats, or a bottle of cold water. Keda, faith might give you hope, but it didn't stop your skin from blistering, the insects from biting, or the hunger from gnawing at your stomach. Survival wasn't a matter of glory. It was a matter of grit. So before we dive into this little time travel experiment, I've got a favor to ask. Hit that like button, and if you really enjoy these journeys through time, make sure to subscribe, but only if it feels right to you. I'd love to have you stick around for more adventures. Let me know in the comments where you're rewatching from and what time it is right now. I find it incredible that people from every corner of the world gather here at the same time to share these stories together, right? Now, let's set the stage. I want you to get comfortable. Dim the lights around you. Maybe switch on a fan so you've got that soft background hum, almost like the whisper of the Nile itself. Close your eyes if you want to imagine it even more vividly, because once we step through this doorway into the past, you'll find yourself in a world that is at once familiar and deeply alien. Welcome to ancient Egypt, the land of pyramids, gods, pharaohs, the kind of ultraviolet violence that doesn't give second chances. And so, your day begins. Even before you've opened your eyes, you feel it, the oppressive heat pressing down on you. The sun doesn't wait politely for you to wake up. It blasts through the cracks of your reed hut like a golden hammer. The air is heavy, the walls already warm to the touch. There are no curtains to block the light, no shades to cool the room, and certainly no air conditioning to rescue you. The desert doesn't ask permission, doesn't give warnings. It simply invades, baking everything it touches, including you. It's washing clothes in ancient Egypt. That's a Nile activity, too. And by washing, don't picture sudsy bubbles and fresh lavender scents. No, we're talking about hauling your sweat-soaked linen to the riverbank and pounding it against the nearest rock, while silently praying that a crocodile doesn't mistake your laundry for a late morning snack. And just when you think the river is merciful, remember this, you're sharing it with livestock, with fishermen, with women scrubbing dishes, with kids splashing around like it's their private swimming hole. Oh, and let us not forget the occasional sewage runoff from upstream or the funeral boat quietly drifting past. This is the same water for drinking, cleaning, and honoring the dead. And somehow, in the Egyptian mind, it's still considered clean. If you live in a city like Memphis or Thebes, you might be lucky enough to avoid crocodile roulette and wash up in a public cistern or basin. But for everyone else, it's Nile or nothing. And don't expect privacy. Okay. Bathing is a community event. Families scrub side by side. Neighbors catch up on gossip. Goats stomp through the mud. And an ibis packs around your ankles with the entitlement of a landlord who owns the river. You rinse, scrub, haul water into clay jars, balance them on your head, and make the long walk home before the midday heat turns your mud brick walls into freshly toasted clay. It's daily, it's necessary, it's spiritual, and it's just a little bit traumatic. So yes, the Nile is sacred. It feeds you, cleans you, quenches your thirst, and waters your crops. But let's not romanticize it too much. It's part miracle, part biohazard, and 100% unavoidable. By now, you've splashed yourself in crocodile-infested waters, sandpapered your skin with river grit, and staggered back home feeling slightly less sticky, but a whole lot more roasted, which means it's time for the next big event. Breakfast, the most important and least glamorous meal of your ancient Egyptian day. Let's set expectations right now. There are no eggs Benedict, no colorful fruit bowls, and absolutely no iced lattes waiting for you. Breakfast isn't a foodie experience, survival fuel. You don't sit at a polished dining table. If you're lucky, you perch on a low wooden stool. If not, you just squat in the corner like everyone else and get on with it. It's the star of the menu. Bread, dense, coarse, and sometimes so tough it could pass for building material. Made from emmer wheat or barley, it's baked in clay ovens that are also popular with rats. Hey, don't be surprised when you bite down on a nice, crunchy piece of sand. Not a topping, just an added bonus from the grinding stones. Consider it a daily calcium supplement. Next up, beer. But don't let that word fool you, okay? This isn't crisp, golden lager served in a frosty mug. Ancient Egyptian beer is thick, cloudy, lukewarm, and more of a liquid porridge than a refreshing drink. It's essentially drinkable bread, calorie-heavy, vaguely fermented, with a sour cereal aftertaste. A smoothie of survival, not satisfaction. And yes, even children drink it. Not because it's cool, but because it's safer than the Nile. At least the brewing process boils out the parasites. If fortune smiles on you, you might get a few extras. An onion to bite into raw, a handful of dried dates, maybe a sprinkle of beans or lentils. Fish, if someone caught one and didn't immediately eat it on the spot. Meat, don't even think about it. That's a festival food for most people. So you chew your rock-hard loaf, sip your grain sludge, swat away the flies circling like you VA laid out in a Lucanite buffet. Because to them, you have. You swat at flies with one hand, cradle your cup of thick grain sludge with the other. And try not to think too hard about the fact that this is probably the best meal you will get all day. Breakfast in ancient Egypt isn't about flavor or indulgence. It's about function. It's fuel, not fun. Just enough calories to keep your body moving until someone puts another sand-infused brick of bread in front of you. A bon AP. You've had your gritty bread, your chunky beer, and your 7 seconds apiece. Congratulations, you're now considered functional. And that means only one thing. It's time for work. And trust me, when it comes to labor, ancient Egypt makes modern burnout look like a spa weekend. Unless you're one of the privileged few. A scribe with ink on your fingers, a priest tucked away in a cool temple, or royalty lounging under palm shade, which, let's face it, you're not. Your life is all muscle and dust. Forget air-conditioned cubicles. Forget coffee breaks. Forget ergonomic chairs. Your office is the sun. Your tools are crude, and your performance review depends on whether or not you collapse before noon. If you're a farmer, the day starts before sunrise. By the time Ra peeks over the horizon, You're already ankle deep in Nile mud, yanking weeds or planting barley, while an overseer watches you like a hawk. In his favorite hobby, yelling, you drag wooden plows, swing heavy sickles, and work the earth with your bare hands until your skin splits. Back hurting, perfect. That means the job is being done correctly. If you're a laborer, things are even more biblical. Imagine hauling multi-ton stones for temples and pyramids beneath a merciless sky. No boots, no gloves, it's just calloused hands, bare feet, and ramps made of gravel, sweat, and sheer prayer. You stumble. That S, a broken ankle, and maybe a shrug from the foreman before he tells someone else to take your place. And then there's tomb work. That's a grind of its own. Hour after hour, you hammer limestone, carve burial chambers, and haul debris. Not for yourself, of course, but for pharaohs who will get to rest forever while you keep chiseling until your arms feel like sandbags. And here's the kicker. If you mess up, if the design is wrong, the chamber collapses or the sacred symbols are botched. Job security might involve a sealed chamber, a curse, and your boss saying, problem solved. And don't think women have it easier. The labor is different, but no less crushing. Domestic work means grinding grain until your arms ache, hauling water jars that way as much as toddlers, weaving endless yards of linen, caring for children, and still joining in on field work when extra hands are needed. Your break comes when the baby falls asleep for 7 minutes. You use that time not to rest, but to prepare dinner or patch clothing. You eat on the go, wipe sweat with your tunic, and keep moving, because slowing down means falling behind, and falling behind, that means losing your grain quota, and the overseer will make sure you know it. It's your fault. There's no time clock to punch. The sun is your supervisor, and it doesn't let up until it sinks behind the horizon. Only then do you stumble back to your mud brick home, half alive, your skin caked with dust, your muscles trembling, and your mind replaying the fantasy of softer sandals and a sun god who maybe, just maybe, could be a little less aggressive. Work in ancient Egypt isn't just hard, it's endless. It's a full body commitment to survival, day after day, until your strength fails, your overseer replaces you, or your body simply gives out. And the cruelest part, this still isn't the worst of it. After sweating your soul out in the fields or hammering away in the quarry, you might feel the urge to let out a sigh or grumble under your breath. Maybe a quiet ugh, this job stinks, or a muttered, why am I doing this again? But hold that thought, because in ancient Egypt, complaining isn't just seen as bad manners. It could literally be treated as treason. Why? Because your boss isn't just some landowner with a bad temper. He's nothing less than a god on earth. The pharaoh isn't a king who got lucky being born into a rich family, nor is he a ruler chosen by the people. No, he's the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon-headed son of Ra, handpicked by the heavens to maintain Ma'at, the divine cosmic balance that keeps the sun rising, the Nile flooding, and the world itself from falling into chaos. In simpler words, if the river overflows perfectly this year, you thank the pharaoh. If it doesn't, well, maybe you didn't pray hard enough. Questioning his rule isn't just disrespectful, it's blasphemy. Speaking ill of him could earn you a back full of whip marks, heavy iron shackles, or a one-way ticket to the afterlife without the luxury of your favorite burial goods to keep you company. And it's not like you can ever forget his presence. His face is everywhere, carved into towering statues, painted on temple walls, stamped on coins, even imprinted into bread molds. His name is sung in rituals, echoed in prayers, and etched into stone for eternity. In every mural, his figure is painted bigger and bolder than anyone else's, not because the artist got carried away, but because the law demanded it. And if you're just a humble farmer or stone carver, forget meeting him. The closest you'll ever get is catching a fleeting glimpse of a golden bark gliding by during a festival procession, glittering, untouchable, and gone in the blink of an eye before he returns to a palace you'll never step foot in, surrounded by scribes, soldiers, priests, and enough treasure to buy a kingdom. Here's some fun fact. He basically is the kingdom. Every project you work on, whether it's chiseling hieroglyphs into a temple wall, raising a tomb big enough to scrape the sky, or sculpting a statue so massive it makes mountains jealous, is done in his honor. And you're expected to do it with a smile, because the official story says, not just laboring you, re-serving with divine joy. Of course, it's a lot safer to repeat that line than to tell the truth, that your back aches, your hands bleed, and you'd rather be anywhere else. Rebellion? Don't even think about it. Pharaohs don't negotiate, they erase. Entire villages that dared to withhold taxes have been wiped off the map, leaving nothing but whispers in the desert wind. So yes, the pharaoh is a god, and you're just lucky to be allowed to sweat in his name. Now, back to work. And if you thought working under the blazing Egyptian sun was your biggest problem, think again. Because in ancient Egypt, your worst roommate isn't your fellow worker, it's sand. Endless, unavoidable, soul-crushing sand. It's in your bed, your food, your water, your clothes. It scratches your skin, grinds in your teeth, and stings your eyes. You can't escape it. Could be plowing the fields, praying in a temple, bargaining in the market, or even trying to sleep, okay? And then, suddenly, a hot gust of desert wind smacks you in the face, turning your cheeks into a cruel exfoliation experiment you never signed up for. And that's just the beginning. Let's talk about clothes. You wear linen? Because what else could you possibly wear in this heat? It's light, it's breathable, and yet about as useful at keeping sand out as a fishing net is at holding water. The fabric doesn't protect you, it betrays you. Slides down your tunic, sticks to your sweaty skin, somehow works its way into folds of your body you didn't even know existed until now. Eating, forget about it. Every meal is a gamble. Every loaf of bread doubles as a sand trap. Since the flour is crushed between heavy stone slabs, tiny flakes of grit sneak into the dough. That means Egyptians weren't just eating their wheat. They were crunching down on bits of their own grindstones, too. Archaeologists today find ancient teeth ground flat, worn smooth like pebbles in a river. Proof that breakfast, lunch, and dinner came with a side of slow-motion dental torture. Okay. And don't think your house offers an escape. Mud brick walls crack, ceilings crumble, and windows. No glass, just empty holes inviting the desert to move right in. The wind carries sand straight into your cooking pots, across your floors, and into your bed until sleeping feels like curling up inside a cat's litter box. Footwear, mostly optional. Many people go barefoot, which means every step outside turns your feet into raw, battered leather. Even when you own sandals, they're usually made of woven reeds. Fashionable, maybe, but about as protective as paper armor. Then come the sandstorms, Egypt's version of divine punishment. 1 second, you're chatting with a neighbor. The next, you're choking, blinded, spitting grit, while your eyes feel like someone dumped the entire Sahara directly into them. The air disappears in a swirl of dust, and your friends become nothing more than coughing shadows in the fog. Sand isn't just scenery. Here it's a permanent roommate. It's the extra spice in every meal, the intruder in your lungs, and the thief of your dignity. It crawls into your skin. It settles into your breath. It becomes part of you. And no, you can't wash it away. You first get this straight. The gods are everywhere. Your city is crowded with shrines to countless deities, each handling some crucial duty. There's Ra driving the sun across the heavens like some celestial chauffeur. Thoth, the ibis-headed master of wisdom, oversees scribes and moon schedules. Sobek, half crocodile and entirely nightmare, guards the Nile's waters. And Bastet, the feline goddess, practically runs public relations. Forget about personal liberty. Your daily existence bends toward satisfying them. Rise in the morning, salute Ra, pour beer, say sorry to Hathor, stub a toe, mutter quietly, or risk calling down a spirit with issues. Before eating, Share a portion with the gods. Before sleep, whisper prayers so sad the chaos bringer doesn't flip your house into oblivion overnight. Even burials are week-long ordeals where the departed must face trials, dodge monsters, and prove they lived honorably or face eternal deletion. About the afterlife, Egyptians treated it like serious business. Death wasn't an end, it was a judgment. Your heart got weighed against a feather of truth, too heavy from lies, cruelty, or maybe stealing someone's goat. Then, Ammit, a beast with crocodile jaws, lion body, and nightmare legs, devoured it. Okay. So yes, death still felt like probation. Okay. Yet strangely, the belief system wasn't hopeless, it gave comfort. Egyptians saw existence as part of cosmic harmony. Follow rituals, uphold Mat, the law of order and truth. Okay. And you earned everlasting peace, food, and maybe a boat. Naturally, the wealthy gained more divine attention. Temples grew colossal. Priests wielded enormous influence, while peasants merely prayed. Generosity flowed their way. In Egypt, faith wasn't optional. It was your employment contract, your insurance, and your roadmap for eternity. And when you step on something sharp, get bitten by something odd, or contract an illness switch, in ancient Egypt, it's practically Tuesday's time to see a healer. But don't expect waiting rooms or sterile clinics. Healing came from a cocktail of spells, plants, and sheer determination. First up, the physician. To their credit, they ranked among the most skilled of antiquity. They possessed surgical equipment, medical writings, and a solid grasp of anatomy. Yet, here's the twist: Egyptian science never traveled without magic. A paste of honey, moldy bread, and herbs was prescribed. Honey fights infection. Mold carries early penicillin traits, so somewhat effective. But before it touched your wound, a spell was whispered just in case your stomach pains came courtesy of a cranky ghost or vengeful god. Got a pounding headache? In ancient Egypt, the cure wasn't tea aspirinate, was crushed onions rubbed into your scalp, while someone whispered hymns to the gods. Got a stubborn cough? Forget honey and tea. You'd be smeared with a sticky paste of cow dung and dates right across your chest. And if your eyes were infected, out came a bizarre cocktail of lizard blood, ochre, and beer, all topped off with a prayer to Horus for good measure. Surprisingly, surgery did exist. Abscesses were drained, bones were set, and wounds were stitched shut with linen thread. Don't expect anesthesia, only pain relief. You get was a strong friend holding your shoulders down while you screamed into a mud brick pillow. Dentistry wasn't any kinder. Thanks to sand constantly grinding into bread, your teeth were worn down by your 20s. If one got infected, you had three choices: live in agony, die from infection, or let someone yank it out with crude, blacksmith-made pliers that looked more like torture devices. Of course, no Egyptian treatment was complete without magic. Amulets were hung around your neck for everything: childbirth, surgery, even a sneeze that seemed a little too suspicious. Because sometimes the real illness wasn't physical at all, it was an invisible serpent spirit wrapped around your spleen. And here, as the plot twist, most people didn't see coming. Ancient Egyptian women actually had more rights than women in many later civilizations. They could own land, run businesses, file for divorce, and even drag a man to court. On paper, it sounds progressive, almost shockingly modern. But before you romanticize it as a girl boss paradise, remember that everyday life was still brutally hard. Legal rights didn't erase the grind of survival, disease, and superstition that ruled daily existence. If you're a woman in ancient Egypt, your day starts long before the sun even peeks over the horizon. First up, grinding grain by hand with a heavy flat stone that slowly turns wheat into flour and your back into dust. Then it's a non-stop list: hauling water from the Nile, cooking breakfast, caring for kids, feeding animals, managing the household, and pitching in at the fields when needed. You're basically a one-woman workforce wrapped in linen. Forget-me time, spa days, or maternity leave. Childbirth, that's a gamble every single time. Midwives are there, sure, but there are no epidurals, no antiseptics, and certainly no heart-filled birthing playlists. You deliver in a sweltering room, surrounded by incense, whispered prayers, and the constant hope that you don't bleed out. Fashion, well, there are linen dresses, cool and breathable, yes, but no underwear, no shoes, and no protection from the scorching sun. Sand invades every fold of fabric, and insects treat you like a all-you-can-eat buffet. Cosmetics exist, but they're lead-based and applied with sticks that look suspiciously like toothpicks. Hope you like multitasking, because beauty might literally kill you. Now, if you happen to be born into a wealthy family, life takes a softer edge. You might learn to read, manage estates, keep records, or even rise to priestess. Royal blood, that's the jackpot. Think of queens like Hatshepsut or Cleopatra, women who ruled empires with power, wit, and eyeliner sharp enough to kill. But for most women, reality doesn't match the legal rights written on papyrus. Those rights may let you own property, inherit wealth, or take a man to court, but daily life is still dominated by survival. You work, sweat, carry, birth, bury, and pray. You're not chained by lawyer, chained by labor. Still, in a world where most women were considered property, Egyptian women stood apart, okay? They could inherit, keep their wealth, and weren't swallowed into their husband's identity. That's no small thing, yet comfort that belonged to goddesses carved in stone, not to mothers elbow deep in bread dough, swatting flies while balancing a crying toddler on one hip. Hey, and when you finally collapse after another brutal day of grinding bread, hauling buckets, avoiding sandstorms, and hoping the gods are in a good mood, don't think it's over. In Egypt, death isn't the end. It's the beginning of a long, nerve-wracking journey through the afterlife, complete with paperwork, judges, and the scariest courtroom you'll ever enter. Your soul's first stop is the Hall of Mat, where 42 gods sit like cosmic lawyers, waiting to hear your testimony. You recite the negative confessions, a list of all the sins you didn't commit. I did not steal. I did not lie. Did not covet my neighbor's donkey. One mistake, one slip of the tongue, and you've basically talked yourself into spiritual ruin. Then comes the ultimate test. Your heart, the seat of your soul, is weighed on a scale against the feather of Mat, symbol of truth and balance. If your heart is light, you pass into eternity. If it's heavy with lies, cruelty, or even one stolen goat well, that's where Amit comes in. She's part crocodile, part lion, part hippo, and all nightmare. She doesn't scold you. She doesn't lock you up, okay? She eats your soul. Gone. Erased. Eternal nothingness, okay? In a society obsessed with eternity, that's the worst punishment of all, okay? So, one wrong word, one heavy heart, one missed prayer, and it's over. Your body might have survived Egypt, but your soul, that's another matter entirely. Imagine the afterlife in ancient Egypt as the most stressful open book exam ever created. Fail, and you not just embarrassed you, eaten by a terrifying mythological creature that is part lion, part hippo, part crocodile. Pass, and congratulations. You've earned eternity in the field of reeds, a perfect version of Egypt, filled with endless crops, calm waters, loving family, and hopefully a lot fewer sand fleas. No wonder Egyptians poured so much energy into tomb building, funerary rituals, and magical texts, like the Book of the Dead, essentially a cosmic study guide, packed with prayers, spells, and practical advice such as, maybe don't offend the crocodile god. The afterlife promised beauty and peace, but the path there was razor thin. One careless curse word, one missed temple tax, and suddenly you're nothing more than a snack for the devourer. And yet, while eternity was uncertain, life in the Egyptian sun was guaranteed to be hot. Salvation came in the form of linen thin, breathable, and mercifully light. Every class of society wore it. Men tied on simple kilts or loincloths, while women slipped into straight linen dresses with or without straps. Wealthy Egyptians could afford pleats, beads, or dyed patterns, but for the majority, clothing was plain, white or grayish, depending on how long it had been since laundry day. Speaking of laundry, it wasn't a gentle rinse cycle. His clothes were scrubbed by hand in the Nile, all while keeping one eye open for crocodiles and hippos. Footwear wasn't much better. Sandals, woven from reeds or stitched from leather, were mostly reserved for priests or special occasions. For everyday life, bare feet on scorching sand and sharp stones were the norm. Accessories weren't just decorations, they served a purpose. Amulets guarded against evil, necklaces signaled wealth, and a paint made from powdered gold didn't just look striking, cut down the blinding sun, and even warded off eye infections. But no amount of beads or makeup could save you from Egypt's real tormentors. Insects, flies, gnats, and mosquitoes swarmed constantly, turning your airy linen outfit into a welcome mat. People slathered themselves with perfumed oils, swatted endlessly, and prayed their clothes didn't cling like a wet curtain once the midday sun hit full force. Life was hot, sticky, buzzing with bugs, and yet, for the ancient Egyptians, this was just the price of living under the favor of the Nile. And of course, your wardrobe doesn't exactly change with the seasons, mostly because Egypt doesn't really have seasons the way we think of them today. It's either hot or slightly less hot, which means your trusty linen outfit isn't just for summer, it's your year-round uniform. Whether you're re-roasting under a blazing 110 desert sun or shivering slightly when the temperature dips to a chilly 70 at night, that same breezy white tunic is what you'll be wearing. Quiche fashion was simple but clever, light, elegant, and far more practical than the heavy woolen togas the Romans would later force themselves into. But don't let the graceful look fool you, because no matter how airy your linen feels, your daily life is still brutally heavy. The heat beats down endlessly. The sand finds its way into every fold of clothing, and the bugs. They're relentless little demons who couldn't care less about your personal space. So you push through another scorching day, hauling bricks for construction, trudging through sandstorms, swatting flies, and silently praying that your only outfit doesn't completely disintegrate mid-task. Yet, survival in ancient Egypt is always temporary. No matter how strong, resilient, or stubborn you are, odds are you won't live much past 35. Let's break it down. If you make it out of childhood alive, feat in itself. Since infant and child mortality rates were sky-high, you're shoved into adulthood almost immediately. By age 12 or 13, you're already expected to marry, work, and start raising children of your own. Why so fast? Because time isn't on your side. Death lurks everywhere. Heat stroke, infections from even the smallest cuts, childbirth complications, crocodile attacks in the Nile, poisonous scorpion stings, or even moldy bread laced with toxins. And forget about doctors swooping in with antibiotics or modern medicine. If you spike a fever, the best you can hope for is a healer armed with honey, herbs, prayers, and a lot of optimism. The rest is up to the gods. But here's the surprising part. Egyptians weren't terrified of death. They prepared for it sometimes more carefully than we prepare for retirement today. If you were wealthy, you started saving early for the ultimate luxury package, a grand tomb, the ancient world's version of a 5-star eternity suite. You'd commission murals for your walls, fill your burial chamber with food, perfumes, furniture, jewelry, and even magical little figurines called Shaptus mini servant dolls, whose sole purpose was to do your chores in the afterlife. Think of them as eternal interns, working for you while you nap forever in paradise. Your body would be carefully embalmed, cleansed with natron salts, wrapped in pristine linen, and placed inside a beautifully painted sarcophagus. You'd even be buried with a copy of the Book of the Dead, so much an apocalypse scroll as a mystical travel guide. It contained passwords to pass divine gates, spells to trick demons, and detailed instructions on how not to get eaten by monsters hungry for your soul. If you were poor, though, your afterlife arrangements were a little less glamorous. Most likely, your family would dig a shallow pit in the sand, wrap your body in whatever scraps of cloth they could find, drop in a pot or two for offerings, and cover you with earth. No gold mask, no elaborate murals, just you, the desert wind, and maybe a prayer whispered into the silence. Cut. Still, even the poorest Egyptians clung to the same dream as their pharaohs: entry into the field of reeds, a blissful paradise where the sun is always gentle, the Nile always flows, fields are eternally fertile, and life is free from hunger, pain, and endless labor. There, you could farm without sweat, eat without ever feeling full, and sail the river forever under an endless golden sky. So yes, odds are you'll die young in ancient Egypt. But if you lived with honor, prayed to the right gods, and avoided offending too many jackal-headed deities, you just might earn yourself an eternity in comfort. You've been embalmed, wrapped in layer after layer of linen, blessed by priests, and carefully placed in your tomb. Time to rest in peace, right? Well, not quite, because in ancient Egypt, peace wasn't guaranteed, not even for the dead. Here's the problem. Tombs were basically treasure vaults. They weren't just filled with mummies. They were stocked with gold amulets, jewelry, carved statues, perfumed oils, piles of fine linens. And in the case of pharaohs, even boats and chests of dazzling treasure, all meant to accompany the soul into the afterlife. To the living, however, this wasn't a sacred cargo. It was the ancient equivalent of leaving your house unlocked with piles of gold sitting inside. And where there's treasure, there will always be someone willing to steal it. Tomb robbery in Egypt became such a constant threat that pharaohs waged a never-ending battle against it. They carved elaborate curses onto tomb walls, warnings that promised gruesome fates to intruders. Threats like, "May a crocodile devour your soul," or "May your body be twisted forever by a fiery serpent." They tried to outsmart thieves by hiding burial chambers deep within cliffs, building trapdoors, and layering on deception like a puzzle box of stone. Spoiler alert, none of it worked. Robbers still came. Sometimes they were desperate locals. Sometimes there were corrupt workers who had built the tombs themselves and knew every secret passage. In certain cases, even priests and guards, the very people meant to protect the dead, joined in. And if they were caught, punishment was brutal. Public beatings, mutilation, exile, or even death. But when the reward was gold, food, and valuables worth more than years of wages, the gamble was often worth it. After all, the dead don't fight back. And it wasn't just pharaohs and nobles who lost their treasures. Commoners' graves were raided too. A poor farmer might only be buried with a jug of beer, a loaf of bread, or a simple tool to use in the afterlife, but even that was worth stealing in hard times. Linen was currency. Food was survival. Sometimes robbing a tomb wasn't just greed, it was desperation. A starving father might see a funerary offering not as a sacred ritual, but as dinner for his children. So, in Egypt, even death gave no guarantee of safety. Your name could be scratched off your coffin, your mummy torn apart. Your carefully prepared afterlife offerings stolen by someone with a pickaxe and an empty stomach. Rest in peace. Only if no one can find your tomb. And then, of course, there's the writing on those very tomb walls, the famous hieroglyphs. Majestic, mysterious, and instantly recognizable. Rows of birds, snakes, lotus flowers, watchful eyes, and human figures striding sideways like runway models frozen in stone. To us, they look like art. To the Egyptians, they were words, sacred words. Hieroglyphs weren't doodles or decoration. They were an entire writing system, one of the most complex the world has ever known. Over 700 symbols and counting. Some stood for entire words, others for sounds, and still others called determinatives were like context clues, clarifying meaning when things got confusing. You'd think drawing a star to mean star would be easy, but no. Egyptians layered meaning, nuance, and symbolism into every stroke. To make things even trickier, there were no spaces, no punctuation, and no vowels. Reading ancient Egyptian was less like flipping through a book and more like solving an endless, beautiful riddle carved in stone. Hieroglyphs weren't locked into one reading style. Okay, they could run left to right to left, or even top to bottom, depending entirely on the scribe's mood that day. The trick to decoding them was simple. Look at the direction the birds or people face. If they look right, you read right. If they look left, you read left. And if they're upside down, good luck. But here's the thing. Learning hieroglyphs wasn't for everyone. Literacy was rare. Maybe 1% of Egyptians could actually read and write. To join that elite group, you had to become a scribe. And that meant starting as a child, spending years memorizing hundreds of symbols, copying scroll after scroll, and writing until your hand cramped into a permanent claw. Brutal training, but the reward was massive. Scribes were respected, well-fed, and shielded from the back-breaking labor of hauling stone under the burning sun. Instead, they handled tax records, letters, court cases, and sacred texts. They were the quiet power brokers of Egypt, living proof that writing was strength. For everyone else, though, writing wasn't just communication, it was magic. Hieroglyphs were sacred, symbols that carried divine force. Scribing someone's name could preserve their soul forever. Erasing it, that was spiritual annihilation. So, yes, spelling in Egypt was literally a matter of life and death. Hieroglyphs may look like ancient emoji, but in reality, they were a puzzle box of meaning, packed with mythology, mathematics, and mystery. Beautiful, absolutely, easy, not a chance. After enduring chapters of heat, hunger, endless sand, superstition, and bone-crushing work, it is time to ask the real question. Could you survive even one day in ancient Egypt? Honestly, probably not. It's tempting to romanticize that world gleaming golden tombs, lotus-scented air, graceful hieroglyphs, animal-headed gods, and a culture obsessed with beauty and order. But behind the monuments and art, everyday life was brutal. A typical Egyptian morning began on a dirt floor, surrounded by flies, smoke, and livestock. If you didn't work, you didn't eat. You trudged barefoot across blazing sand, carried water, cooked over open flames, and lived in cramped quarters with no medicine, no privacy, and no relief from disease or hunger. Your worries weren't just earthly. Divine punishment loomed over every misstep, and your very afterlife depended on passing the God's judgment. Forget antibiotics, painkillers, sunscreen, plumbing, or even a second pair of clothes. And once you were born into a class, that was your life. No upward mobility, no reinvention. You were a farmer, a builder, a servant, or you were nothing. And yet, the Egyptians weren't miserable. Far from it. They found joy in music, festivals, family, food, and faith. They believed deeply in their gods, their purpose, and in the eternal beauty of existence. They laughed, danced, painted, and dreamed of eternity so vividly that they carved their visions into stone monuments that still defy time. But let's be real. Take away your AC, your filtered water, your Advil, your sneakers, and your phone, and you'd collapse before the second sandstorm rolled in. No, you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt, but they lasted millennia. And that endurance is exactly why their civilization still fascinates us today. Across the ocean, in ancient, another story of grandeur and terror rises from the stones. One pyramid in particular refuses to be forgotten. Unlike the serene temples of Egypt, this one stares back at you with open-mouthed stone serpents, frozen mid-strike, fangs bared, eyes wide. This is the temple of the feathered serpent, dedicated to Quetzalcoatl. But unlike other temples that stretch reverently toward the heavens, this one radiates menace. From the moment you approach, you feel that the serpents aren't decoration. They're warnings, and what happened beneath them was even darker. Excavations revealed not just offerings, but hundreds of human sacrifices. Over 200 bodies, many decapitated, hands bound, warriors laid in precise formations. Some had obsidian blades at their sides. Others wore grisly ornaments made of human teeth and jawbones. This was no mass grave, it was ritual, a deliberate act of cosmic balance, carved in blood. The temple of the feathered serpent wasn't just a shrine. It was a stage where rulers fused religion, warfare, and terror to control a city of more than 100,000 souls. For blood wasn't horrid, was necessity. And yet, the mystery deepens, because, for all its power, left us almost nothing to explain itself. No kings' names carved into stone, no written records. We don't even know what the builders called themselves. Later, Aztecs named it the place where gods were born, standing in the Avenue of the Dead, surrounded by pyramids that scraped the sky. You start to see why. At its height, was one of the largest cities on earth, rivaling Rome and Alexandria, yet it remains an enigma. A colossal civilization, built with precision, ruled by a council, a priesthood, something we still don't fully understand. Evidence of Teotihuacan's power has been found hundreds of miles away from the Maya cities of Teco and Copan to the distant Zapach capital of Monte Alban. Obsidian blades, ceramic styles, murals, and even political meddling. In one case, Teotihuacan emissaries may have helped overthrow a local Maya king to install a ruler more favorable to their interests. But how did they maintain such a vast network? How did a city with no known writing system command such authority across Mesoamerica? The answer may lie in how they combined cosmic ideology with statecraft. Their temples were more than places of worship. They were tools of control, aligning perfectly with astronomical events, serving as theaters of ritual sacrifice, and reminding every citizen and every visitor that Teotihuacan was no ordinary city. It was the axis of the world, a sacred engine that kept time, fate, and blood flowing in sync. At the heart of it all stood the temple of the feathered serpent. To understand the temple, you must first understand the deity it was dedicated to, the feathered serpent. Known later by the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl and to the Maya as Calcan. This figure is one of the most enigmatic gods in all of Mesoamerican mythology. Centuries before the Aztecs rose to power, the feathered serpent was already a central, possibly supreme divine force. But here's the paradox. What kind of god is both a serpent and a bird? Think about that. Serpents slither through the underworld, lay shed their skin, symbolizing rebirth, duality, and death. Birds soar high in the sky, closer to the sun, representing freedom, divinity, and life-giving wind. To combine these two, earthbound and sky-dwelling, death and life, chaos and order, was to create something entirely cosmic, something terrifyingly powerful. The feathered serpent wasn't just a god, he was a bridge between worlds. On the facade of the temple, carved in deep relief, we see dozens of his images. Goggle eyes, bare teeth, plumed headdresses. Some historians believe these represent the god himself. Others suggest they're warriors or priestly figures adorned in divine regalia to signal their authority. Either way, they are everywhere. The temple is covered in these snake-bird hybrids, as if the structure itself breathes with the divine presence. But the feathered serpent wasn't just a god of the heavens, it was intimately tied to sacrifice. Blood was the fuel that kept the cosmos in motion. Quetzalcoatl, though later remembered as a gentle, civilizing deity, had a much darker role in Teotihuacan. He demanded offerings, and not just of maize or incense, but of life itself. In some myths, he descended into the underworld to retrieve the bones of the dead and create humankind. But to bring life from death, there had to be a trade. The gods sacrificed themselves for humanity, and humans in return were expected to do the same. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent wasn't just a monument to faith. It was a cosmic engine designed to link the sky, the earth, and the underworld through ritual. Every stone, every serpent head, every buried victim fed into that system. Teotihuacan didn't just worship the feathered serpent. They embodied his logic, paradox, power, and blood. And the most disturbing truths were hidden beneath the surface. For centuries, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent stood silently, a weathered, imposing structure, half swallowed by time. Locals whispered legends. Scholars made guesses. But no one could have imagined what was buried beneath its layered stones until archaeologists broke through in the late 1980s and early 2000s. What they found wasn't just unexpected, it was unsettling. Hidden beneath the temple's foundations were a series of long, sealed chambers and pits, each filled with carefully arranged human remains. These weren't the messy results of war or disease. These were deliberate sacrifices, systematic, ritualistic, cold. The victims, numbering over 200, were young men, many between 15 and 25. Some wore necklaces made of human jawbones. Others had their hands tied behind their backs. A few were decapitated. Obsidian knives, sharp and black as night, were scattered nearby, the unmistakable tools of ritual slaughter. And this is where it gets darker. The arrangement of the bodies followed geometric and symbolic patterns. They weren't buried randomly. They were placed in quadrants, cardinal directions, possibly to mirror the cosmos. Even the number of bodies mattered. It wasn't just about death. It was about meaningful death. Offerings surrounded the victims. Jaguar bones, serpents, exotic shells from the distant Gulf Coast, figurines, and obsidian blades that had never been used in battle. This wasn't punishment. It was a gift. These young men, most likely warriors, had been selected not to die in disgrace, but to die as part of something transcendent. To the Teotihuacanos, the very act of building a temple may have required human sacrifice. It was as if every stone had to be consecrated with blood. Every layer raised only after an offering had been made. The deeper you dig, the more sacrifice you find. In one chamber, archaeologists discovered elaborate tunnels filled with mercury and mica materials associated with the underworld. The floor glimmered like water. Was this a symbolic passage to the land of the dead, a mirror of the night sky? The more they excavated, the more it felt like the temple was not built on top of death, but constructed to encase it. The blood didn't stain the stone by accident. The stone was meant to hold the blood, and all of it was for the gods. Look closer at the temple of Ty, the feathered serpent, and you'll notice something strange, something unnerving. It doesn't just sit on the landscape, it aligns with the universe. Teotihuacan wasn't built randomly. The entire city was laid out along precise cosmic axes. Its central avenue of the dead runs at a 15 angle off true north. Not a mistake, but a deliberate shift, possibly to align with the setting of the Pleiad star cluster or the sun on specific ritual dates. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent sits directly along this avenue, locking it into a grand celestial blueprint. But why? What were they trying to align with? Archaeologists and art coasters have debated this for decades. Some suggest the temple lines up with the equinox sunrise. Others argue it connects to Venus, the planet most sacred to Mesoamerican civilizations, often associated with war, sacrifice, and rebirth. When Venus rose or set, wars were declared, offerings made, and temples activated with ritual fire. Even the temple's dimensions seem intentional. The repetition of the number 7, the number of visible planetary bodies, appears in its step platforms. Their symmetry, rhythm, and a stunning understanding of both earthly, math, and cosmic cycles. And beneath the surface, more clues. In 2003, archaeologists uncovered a tunnel beneath the temple. Not a crude passage, but a deliberately constructed subterranean world. The walls were once covered in powdered pyite, a shimmering mineral that would have reflected light, like starlight. Combined with mercury pools and microlined walls, the tunnel seemed designed to replicate the cosmos itself. To walk through it would be like traveling through the Milky Way, a symbolic journey to the underworld, or perhaps to rebirth. Was this temple not just a place of sacrifice, but a cosmic machine, a portal that aligned earth, sky, and the spirit realm? Some scholars believe Tayoti saw time as circular, not linear. Every ritual, every building, every sacrifice wasn't a one-time event. It was part of an eternal cycle. Death leading to renewal, sacrifice fueling rebirth. The temple's alignments may have helped predict celestial movements, coordinate harvests, and more importantly, time when to offer blood. The temple of the feathered serpent wasn't just looking at the stars, it was trying to speak to them. The temple of the feathered serpent wasn't just a spiritual beacon, it was a political weapon. Its very design was meant to overwhelm, to intimidate, to remind every viewer, local or foreign, who held the reins of power in Teotihuacan. Imagine standing in its shadow 1,800 years ago. You, a visitor from a smaller city-state, would arrive at the Avenue of the Dead, already Eric by the sheer scale of Teotihuacan. But when you reached the temple of the feathered serpent, you'd freeze. The serpent heads stare at you, their fangs bared. Jaguar symbols growled from the stone. The plaza ahead once held massive gatherings, not just for celebration, but for public ritual. You might even witness a sacrifice. The ruling elite of Teotihuacan understood something crucial. Fear is power, and nothing stirs fear like divine wrath. By orchestrating ritual executions in broad daylight, surrounded by cosmic symbols and death imagery, they sent a clear message. The gods are with us, and we are not afraid to feed them. But this wasn't chaos. This was theater. Priests in feathered headdresses and obsidian masks would chant, dance, and spill blood, turning cosmic myth into political performance. It wasn't just about pleasing the gods. It was about reminding everyone watching that the city's rulers had direct access to the divine. They alone could open the heavens or summon rain, protect the people, or destroy their enemies. Even the architecture helped reinforce this propaganda. From the temple's upper tiers, leaders could look down upon the plaza. They controlled not just the narrative, but the very physical space in which it unfolded. The people looked up at the gods, at the rulers, at the sacrifices, and knew their place. And for outsiders, Teotihuacan didn't need to conquer with swords. It conquered with symbols. Visiting dignitaries would carry home tales of awe and terror. They would speak of the feathered serpents, the endless avenues, the blood rituals that lit the sky red. In a world where gods ruled through fear, Teotihuacan positioned itself as their chosen mouthpiece, and the temple of the feathered serpent was the loudest voice of all. At its peak, Teotihuacan was the heartbeat of Mesoamerica, a city of fire and stone, of gods and blood, a city that seemed destined to last forever. But around the year 550 CE, something changed. Something broke, and the silence that followed was as chilling as the temple's stone serpent heads. The fall of Teotihuacan was not loud and glorious. It was gradual, then sudden. Signs of strain began appearing decades earlier. Signs that the cosmic engine was faltering. Evidence points to a long period of drought, crop failure, and social unrest. The very systems that had sustained this grand city, centralized power, religious dominance, cosmic order, began to crack under pressure. And then came the fire. Archaeologists have uncovered widespread burn layers across elite compounds, temples, and administrative buildings, including signs of violent destruction at the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. What's strange is that the lore says residential areas were mostly untouched. This wasn't an external invasion. This was an uprising, a rebellion, possibly from within. The very people who once watched sacrifices in awe may have risen against their priest kings. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent, once a symbol of divine authority, was ransacked. Sculptures were defaced. Fires were set. Ritual spaces were desecrated. And then, silence. Teotihuacan wasn't completely abandoned overnight, but it lost its soul. Trade networks collapsed. Artistic production ceased. The great rituals stopped. The ruling elite disappeared. The temple no longer spoke. And yet, the mystery only deepened, because while the city faded, its memory endured. Centuries later, the Aztecs arrived in the Valley of Mexico and stumbled upon its ruins. They were Eric. They believed gods had built this place. They named it Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born. They built their own myths around its pyramids, revering it as sacred ground, even as they had no idea who its original builders were. To them, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent was not a ruin. It was a relic of divine truth. But the irony remains. The most powerful city of its time, built on cosmic order and blood, vanished without a written word, without a final record, leaving behind only stone and questions. The gods, it seemed, had gone quiet. For over 1,000 years, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent lay buried beneath layers of dust, volcanic ash, and silence. Locals avoided it. Farmers tilled around it, and the world forgot it until the modern age of archaeology arrived and cracked open the secrets buried within its heart. In the early 20th century, Mexican archaeologists began excavating Teotihuacan. What they found was astonishing: a perfectly engineered city, far older than the Aztecs. But it wasn't until the 1980s and 2000s that the temple itself began to yield its most intimate and most chilling revelations. One of the most dramatic discoveries came in 2011 when researchers uncovered a sealed tunnel beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. It had been deliberately closed off nearly 100 to 800 years earlier, as if to prevent anyone from entering ever again. After years of excavation, scientists unearthed a cosmic corridor, a symbolic underworld lined with pyat to mimic a starlit sky, pools of liquid mercury, and thousands of ritual objects: jade statues, rubber balls, obsidian blades, and even carved wooden masks. It felt less like a tomb and more like a message. Why would the ancient builders go to such lengths? What were they trying to preserve or hide? Some experts believe the tunnel was used in initiation rituals. Others suggest it symbolized the creation of the world, a mythological womb where gods were born, where kings were made, where divine order was negotiated between humans and the cosmos. The mercury, once thought to be only toxic, may have represented water or the fluid veil between worlds. And among all these glittering fragments was one persistent whisper. The feathered serpent still lingered, not just as a myth, but as a presence in murals, in carvings, in the geometry of the temple itself. The serpent hadn't disappeared. It had coiled inward deep into the bones of the city, waiting to be rediscovered. And with each excavation, each uncovered jawbone or golden ornament, we draw a little closer to its message, carved not in language, but in stone, sacrifice, and shadow. Modern science has given us X-rays, drones, and ground-penetrating radar. But even with all our tools, one truth remains. The temple still keeps secrets. Today, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent stands as a haunting monument, not just to a civilization long gone, but to a way of thinking that merged power, cosmos, and death into one unbreakable system. Tourists snap photos. Children run past the stone serpent heads, but the ground beneath their feet is soaked in 1,000 untold stories and over 200 known human sacrifices. And still, the temple endures. Its legacy is not just architectural, spiritual, cultural. The feathered serpent, this paradoxical god of sky and earth, continued to evolve. He would be adopted by the Toltecs, then reborn by the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl, where his myth took on a gentler tone. The bringer of knowledge, the god who wept for humanity, the one who vowed to return. This reimagining of the serpent god shows how myths don't die, they transform. Even in modern Mexico, echoes of the feathered serpent persist in art, in murals, in literature, and in national identity. The temple's image has appeared on coins, stamps, and even government buildings. It has become a symbol of mystery, of pre-Columbian brilliance, and of the untamed spiritual world that once pulsed through Mesoamerica. But there's another legacy, one less visible, more uncomfortable. The temple of the feathered serpent forces us to confront the price of belief. It asks hard questions. How far will humans go to feel connected to the divine? What happens when power and religion become indistinguishable? Can beauty coexist with terror? In many ways, the temple isn't just a historical site, okay? It's a mirror, a reflection of us. It's our fascination with life after death, our hunger for meaning, our capacity to build monuments of staggering beauty and to stain them with blood. The temple teaches us that greatness comes with shadows, that civilizations can soar to impossible heights while burying their secrets beneath the stones. And maybe that's why we keep returning, not just to visit, but to understand, because deep down we know the serpent is still watching, not to strike, but to remind us of what we once were and what we still might be. Before we spoke in words, we spoke in rhythm. Tens of thousands of years ago, long before the invention of writing, even before the birth of language itself, early humans began to create something that could only be described as sound with intention. Not speech, not melody, but rhythm. A hand slapping hollow bark, a stick tapping a stone, a foot stomping earth in time. Somewhere in that ancient repetition, something magical emerged. The first drum beat. It wasn't called music, it wasn't called anything, but it felt like something, like communication, like movement, like emotion taking form. Anthropologists have uncovered evidence of primitive percussion instruments dating back over 30,000 years. These were likely made from natural materials. Tree trunks, hollowed out gourds, stretched animal hides. Nothing fancy, nothing preserved. But these rudimentary drums were not toys or idle distractions. They served real purposes, to warn, to summon, to connect. Imagine a tribe scattered across a dense forest. One beat from a distant drum and others knew danger is coming. Or a celebration has begun. Or the gods are listening. The earliest drums weren't just tools. They were extensions of the human body, a heartbeat externalized, a pulse that could be felt across a valley. Drumming wasn't something you watched or listened to. It was something you participated in together around fires, under stars, in caves where echoes made the air itself vibrate. These ancient rhythms became a language of emotion, joy, grief, warning, hope, all expressed not in syllables or symbols, but in patterned sound. Before the first flutes were carved, before stringed instruments were dreamed of, the drum was already alive, anchoring us in time, giving shape to ritual, and uniting individuals into tribes. In that way, the drum became humanity's first instrument, and perhaps its first form of collective identity. No matter where on earth people lived, they created something to strike, something to beat, something to mark the moment, because even when we had no words, we had rhythm, and that rhythm was everything. In the cradle of early human civilization, drums were not just instruments, they were sacred voices. Every tribe, every culture, every corner of the earth developed its own rhythm, but the purpose was nearly universal. commune with the unseen. In Africa, where some of the world's earliest drums emerged, rhythm was deeply intertwined with life, death, and ancestry. The gam carved from a single tree and wrapped in goatskin was believed to contain three spirits. That of the tree, it was carved from the animal whose skin gave it voice, and the craftsman who brought it to life. Played in circles, the gem didn't just accompany rituals, it was the ritual. Then there were the talking drums capable of mimicking human speech through pitch and tone. In West Africa, these drums carried messages across miles, relaying news, warnings, births, and deaths from one village to the next. Long before the telephone, humans were already drumming their messages through the landscape. Across the oceans, Native American tribes treated the drum as a living entity. It was the heartbeat of Mother Earth, played in ceremonies to honor ancestors, summon healing, or guide the souls of the dead. The large POW drum, played by a circle of drummers, was both a musical and spiritual engine, a communal pulse that aligned humans with nature and spirit. In Australia, the Aboriginal people used clapsticks and percussive stomps in the sacred Dreamtime, a mythic era of creation. In the Arctic, Inuit shamans struck frame drums to enter trance states, seeking visions or communicating with spirits during long, dark winters. These weren't performances. These were acts of survival, healing, storytelling, and connection. The drum was to remember. The drum was to belong, and always it was communal. Drums brought people together into sacred circles, synchronizing hearts and intentions. No sheet music, no stage, just bodies moving, hands striking, souls stirring, all unified by rhythm. It didn't matter where on earth you stood. If you heard a drum in the distance, you knew something sacred was happening. Something that words alone could never express. From sacred circles to bloody battlefields, the drum has always spoken, sometimes with comfort and sometimes with command. As human societies evolved into kingdoms and empires, drums transformed into tools of domination, instruments of order, and weapons of fear. The earliest armies didn't have radios or megaphones. They had drums. In ancient China, massive drums called bao were struck to coordinate troops across vast terrains. With a single resonant boom, commanders could signal a charge, retreat, or flanking maneuver. These drums weren't just loud, they were strategic. Each rhythm meant something specific, and trained soldiers knew how to listen, even through the chaos of battle. In Mesopotamia, temple drums were used to announce rulers and summon the public. But in times of conflict, they echoed through city walls, terrifying enemies with a deep, relentless thunder. It wasn't just percussion, it was psychological warfare. When the Romans marched, they brought with them the tympanum, a framed drum used in processions and by cults like that of Cybele, though not a battlefield instrument in the way horns and standards were. Carried symbolic power, a sound of empire, discipline, and order. But no army wielded drums quite like the Ottomans. Their matab bands, the world's first known military orchestras, unleashed an overwhelming storm of drums, cymbals, and horns before battles. The relentless pounding of curse, giant kettle drums, and double-headed bass drums struck terror into the hearts of enemy forces. Some European accounts describe soldiers freezing in panic before even seeing the Ottomans paralyzed by sound. Drums also enforced power off the battlefield. In royal courts across Asia, Africa, and Europe, drum ensembles announced arrivals, marked coronations, underscored political rituals. To beat a drum was to declare power is present. Even enslaved people in the Americas used drums as tools of resistance. On plantations, rhythmic communication kept culture alive and helped orchestrate secret rebellions. The drum, even under oppression, refused to be silenced. So, whether it signaled divine right, military discipline, or raw fear, the drum has always carried a message. This is who rules. This is who marches. And this is the rhythm of power. As civilizations branched out across continents, so too did their rhythms, evolving in form, purpose, and philosophy. In the East, drums became tools of precision, spirituality, and ceremony. In the West, they leaned into military power and eventually orchestral grandeur. Two worlds, two paths, one heartbeat. Koi. In India, the drum became a sacred instrument of divine language. The tabla, with its crisp tones and fluid grace, was used in classical music and devotional performances, but it was more than accompaniment. It was conversation. Each stroke had a name, a meaning, a syllabic identity. Indian drumming wasn't just percussive, it was spoken poetry trained over decades. The tabla player was not just a musician, he was a linguist of rhythm. In Japan, the Dao drum emerged as a ceremonial giant, played in Shinto, rituals, theater, and war. Dao required not just technical skill, but physical discipline. The drummers moved with martial precision, their stances grounded like warriors. In festivals, the booming Tao echoed through mountain valleys, believed to drive away evil spirits and call the gods down to earth. Meanwhile, in Indonesia, the kendang drum led the hypnotic flows of gamelan orchestras, guiding dancers and musicians in sacred temple ceremonies. These rhythms were layered, interlocked, and celestial, a sonic reflection of cosmic harmony. Across the world, in Europe, drums had a different story. They were largely utilitarian during the medieval period, signaling soldiers, marking time, enforcing discipline. Wasn't until the Renaissance and Baroque eras that drums began to enter formal music. Even then, they were kept in the background, coney, thundering beneath royal fanfare, or echoing in grand cathedrals. In this divergence, you see two philosophies. The East saw rhythm as art and spirit, something tied to breath, chant, and meditation. The West saw it as structure and force, a tool to rally, march, and measure. But both understood the drum's core power, to shape time, to dictate pace, to elevate ritual, to connect humans in ways that transcend language. East or West, sacred or strategic, the drum remained central, always listening, always speaking. From mountaintop temples to jungle clearings, from desert fires to candlelit cathedrals, drums have always had a place where the human meets the divine. Long before organized religion took root, rhythm was already a sacred language, a way to pray, to summon, to transcend. Africa, drums were not just instruments, they were spiritual beings. In Yoruba traditions, for example, the batar drum was used to communicate with the Orisha's gods and ancestral spirits. Drummers weren't performers, they were priests. The rhythms they played were encoded prayers, inviting the gods to descend and dance among the living. Each pattern had a purpose, each beat a direction. In Hinduism, the drum appears even in the hands of gods, but the deity, Shiva, in his form as Nataraja, dances the cosmic dance of creation and destruction with a small, hourglass-shaped drum in hand. The Damaru's beat represents the pulse of the universe itself. From silence to sound, from void to form, the drum is a divine heartbeat. In Buddhism, the ritual frame drum is used in monastic chants and meditation ceremonies. Slow, soft strikes guide breath and awareness, acting like a metronome for the soul. It's not loud, it's not aggressive, it simply reminds the practitioner to return again and again to the present moment. Across the Americas, indigenous tribes use drums in vision quests, sweat lodges, and healing ceremonies. Beat is constant, steady, mimicking the rhythm of the womb, helping participants enter trance states or connect with ancestral spirits. In these spaces, the drum doesn't just accompany prayer, it is the prayer. Even within Christianity, where rhythm was often subdued, the drum still found a sacred role. In gospel traditions, particularly in African American churches, drums became a means of praise and power, a heartbeat behind voices lifted in devotion. a reminder of struggle, hope, and divine rhythm in every life. No matter the faith, the ritual, or the god invoked, the drum has been there not as decoration, but as a vessel for energy, its intention, and the mysteries we cannot speak. Because when words fail in worship, rhythm remains, and the divine always listens. For thousands of years, drums were solitary instruments, one body, one sound, one purpose, 8. But in the heart of the industrial age, something revolutionary happened in factories. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, percussion underwent a complete transformation. What had once been a collection of separate instruments scattered across a stage gradually fused into something entirely new, the drum kit. Its birth was practical rather than artistic. In military and theater bands, it took several percussionists to handle bass drum, snare, cymbals, and woodblocks, but space was limited and budgets even tighter. Drummers began experimenting, combining instruments into a single, playable setup. Then, in 1909, the first bass drum pedal was patented. With one foot now able to strike a massive drum, a drummer's hands were freed from more, and the idea caught fire. Over the next few decades, players added toms, cowbells, hi-hats, and ride cymbals, until the kit became a one-person percussion section. More than an instrument, it became a throne. Then came jazz. In smoky clubs of New Orleans and Chicago, the drum kit erupted into a new kind of voice. Jazz drummers weren't just keeping time, they spoke through the kit with syncopation, swing, and finesse. Pioneers like Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich turned rhythm into storytelling, elevating drumming into an art of its own. As jazz evolved into rock, the kit grew louder, bigger, and more powerful. The 1960s and 70s saw explosive setups with multiple toms, splash cymbals, and double bass pedals. Legends like John Bonham, Neil Peart, and Keith Moon pushed endurance and creativity to their limits, proving the drummer wasn't background noise anymore, but the driving engine of the band. Today, the drum kit is everywhere, from gospel churches to EDM festivals, punk garages to world tours. And even as electronic kits and drum machines rise in popularity, the physicality of acoustic drums, the sticks, the skins, the sweat remains irreplaceable. The kit embodies modern rhythm itself, a fusion of centuries, where tradition meets innovation, and one drummer can speak with 10 voices at once. But the drum story isn't limited to the kit. Across continents, every culture has shaped drums into unique identities. In West Africa, the djem still calls communities together, its sharp slaps and deep tones carrying stories across generations. The talking drum, or dundun, provides the pulse around which others gather, turning an ensemble into a conversation with spirits and ancestors. In the Middle East, the darbuk, crafted from clay or metal, delivers lightning-fast rhythms for belly dance and classical Arabic music. Sharp, articulate, and demanding. In the Caribbean and Latin America, drums became vessels of resilience. The conga, bongo, and timbales reflect a fusion of African, indigenous, and Spanish traditions. In Cuba, drums carry sacred voices of the orishas, while in Brazil, the surdo and thunder through samba parades, infusing streets with protest, prayer, and joy. Meanwhile, in India, the mridangam and tabla define classical music with breathtaking precision. Tuned to pitch, they blur the line between rhythm and melody, each stroke carrying centuries of tradition. And then there's the frame drum, among the oldest instruments on earth, found everywhere from Persian dafs to Irish, used in ritual, folk music, and even shamanic ceremonies. Simple in design, but sacred in sound. What unites them all is purpose. Drums are not just instruments, but cultural signatures, built from local materials, shaped by community, and bound to history. They guide, dance, drive ritual, fuel resistance, and preserve identity. The global family of drums is vast, but universal because wherever people live, the earth still echoes with rhythm. By the late 20th century, however, rhythm entered a new age. The digital, the sweaty palms, calloused fingers and wooden sticks began to share space with circuits, pads, and software. Early drum machines of the 1970s, like the Rhythmicon and Roland CR78, produced robotic beats at first, but musicians recognized their potential: perfect timing, infinite control, and sounds no acoustic kit could produce. As technology advanced, electronic kits like Roland's V-drums gave drummers the feel of acoustic playing while triggering thousands of sampled sounds. Silent practice, instant recording, and endless customization became possible at the push of a button. Today, acoustic and digital drums coexist, shaping the soundtrack of modern music. Whether carved from wood or coded in software, whether played with hands, sticks, or pads, the drum continues to evolve, but its purpose remains eternal: to carry the heartbeat of humanity. And with computers came digital audio workstations, DAWs like Ableton, FL Studio, and Logic. Now, anyone with a laptop could build complex rhythms, layering kicks, snares, hi-hats, and sub-bass into vast sonic architectures. Finger drumming on MIDI pads became an art form of its own. It's feared this shift meant the death of traditional drumming, a replacement of human feel with cold precision, but that didn't happen. Instead, hybridity emerged. Acoustic drummers began integrating triggers and samples into their kits. Producers started layering human-played drums with machine beats. The organic and the synthetic found a groove together. Digital drums didn't erase the past. They reimagined it. And today, we live in a world where a single person in a bedroom can build rhythms once requiring entire orchestras, where ancient grooves from Africa, Asia, and the Americas can be sampled, twisted, and given new life in neon-lit dance floors. The tools have changed, but the purpose remains the same: to move bodies, to shape time, to make silence speak. Across every era, every empire, and every evolution in technology, one thing has never changed. The drum remains our oldest and most enduring voice. From ancient fire circles to modern concert halls, from sacred rituals to digital dance floors, the drum has never been just about music. It's about connection to ourselves, to each other, to something bigger. It is the heartbeat we all share. Not metaphorically, literally, because even before we were born, nestled in the womb, the first rhythm we ever hear is that of our mother's heart. Steady, safe, alive. Okay, and when life begins, we chase that rhythm forever. Okay, the drum has been our companion through joy and war, through worship and protest. It has marched beside kings and risen with rebels. It has echoed through temples and subway tunnels. It speaks in every language because it is a language, one that bypasses thought and speaks directly to the body, the bones, the blood. In moments of grief, we drum to mourn. In moments of ecstasy, we drum to celebrate. And in the quiet spaces in between, we drum to remember who we are. Today, percussion continues to evolve. You can find hand-pan street musicians weaving new age rhythms on city corners. Indigenous communities preserving ancient drumming traditions against all odds. Stadium drummers rallying crowds in unison. Children banging pots and pans with instinctual joy. Even artificial intelligence is learning rhythm, but no algorithm can replicate the human soul behind a single imperfect beat. Because rhythm is not just counted, it's felt. And maybe that's why the drum has outlived empires and trends. Because deep down, we all crave the anchor of time, the shared pulse that tells us we are here together now. No matter how advanced our instruments become, or how virtual our experiences grow, there will always be something profoundly grounding about skin on skin, stick on hide, hand on wood, a beat, a breath, a beginning. The drum is not a relic of the past, right? It's a reminder that we were always meant to move in rhythm, to listen, to feel, to play. And as long as humanity endures, the drum will never be silent. Before Manhattan became a forest of glass and steel, it was an island of shadows, not cast by towers, but by church steeples and sloping rooftops. In the early 1800s, the skyline barely existed. The city clung to the southern tip of the island, a dense sprawl of brick towns, timber-framed shops, and dirt-packed roads. Buildings rarely climbed beyond 5 or 6 stories, not because ambition was lacking, but because gravity had the final say. The taller the building, the more weight it carried, and with stone and brick, height came at a steep price. The walls had to be thicker at the bottom to support the upper levels, leaving less room inside and requiring enormous foundations. To build high was to build heavy, and heavy didn't make financial sense. So, the city grew horizontally, spreading northward along a grid that had been planned in 1811, one of the boldest urban blueprints of its time. But underneath that grid, beneath the layers of cobblestone and soil, Manhattan held a secret weapon: bedrock, deep, dense, and unwavering. The granite spine that ran beneath the island would one day support some of the tallest structures in human history. But for now, it lay quiet, untouched, waiting. Life in early Manhattan was noisy but grounded. Commerce bustled in the harbor, ships lined the piers, and horses clattered through narrow streets. The economy grew, immigration surged, and the island swelled with energy. But still, the city hugged the ground. The sky remained untouched. The only real vertical statements were churches, Trinity Church being the most prominent. Its spire, completed in 1846, rose over 280 feet, and for a time, it was the tallest structure in New York. But even that was more symbol than skyline. What no one knew then was that the skyline's future wouldn't be shaped by stone or wood, but by iron, steel, and vision. And it wouldn't be limited by the ground. It would rise far above it. Manhattan wasn't yet a city of towers, but the stage was being set. The island was ready. The dream was forming, and soon the skyline would begin to stretch. For centuries, gravity was the greatest architect in Manhattan. It kept buildings short, cities flat, and human ambition tethered to the earth. But in the mid-9th century, 2 breakthroughs would break the skyline wide open. One lifted people, the other lifted buildings. The first came in 1852, when an inventor named Elisha Otis unveiled his revolutionary safety elevator in a dramatic demonstration at the New York Crystal Palace. Otis stood on a platform suspended high above a crowd. He ordered the rope to be cut. The crowd gasped, but the platform didn't fall. A hidden mechanism locked the lift in place. With that single, breathtaking moment, Otis changed the rules of height. Until then, the top floors of buildings were the cheapest. No one wanted to climb stairs, But once elevators became safe and practical, those upper floors became premium space, offering light, air, and status. The vertical city suddenly made economic sense. But being able to move people upward wasn't enough. Buildings still relied on load-bearing walls, which grew thicker and more cumbersome the higher they went. That's where innovation number 2 arrived: the steel skeleton. In the 1880s and 1890s, engineers began using steel frames to support the weight of buildings, allowing exterior walls to become thin curtains rather than heavy structural anchors. This method, known as steel frame construction, gave architects a new freedom. Build as high as the frame could handle. Suddenly, height was no longer a risk. It was a strategy. The technology had arrived. The materials were here, And Manhattan, with its solid bedrock and booming economy, was the perfect canvas. The island's tight geography encouraged vertical thinking, and its status as a financial capital meant that everyone, from banks to newspapers, wanted their name visible in the clouds. The elevator made the sky accessible. The steel skeleton made the sky buildable. Together, they didn't just change architecture. They redefined what a city could be. Now, the race would begin, not outward, upward. By the late 19th century, New York City was no longer content to sprawl. It wanted to soar. The ground was full. The streets were packed, and the only place left to build was up. With steel frame construction and the elevator now established, Manhattan became a proving ground, in the skyline a battlefield for ambition. The first shots were fired in the 1890s. In 1890, the New York World Building, home to Joseph Pulitzer's newspaper empire, rose 20 stories above Park Row. It was the tallest office building in the world. Briefly, not to be outdone, the Park Row building claimed the title next in 1899. Standing at 391 feet, each new tower was a declaration, not just of wealth, but of vision. To build higher was to announce, we are the future. Soon the skyline began to sprout with steel giants. The Singer Building, completed in 1908, stood at 612 feet, becoming the tallest building in the world, and the first structure to surpass the height of the spire of Trinity Church, which had held the record for over 50 years, but even that wouldn't last. In 1913, the Woolworth Building took the crown. Designed by architect Cass Gilbert and funded in cash by retail magnate Frank W. Woolworth, it rose 792 feet over 55 stories in a soaring display of neo-Gothic beauty. Dubbed the Cathedral of Commerce, the Woolworth wasn't just tall, it was majestic, an architectural sermon about America's rise as a modern power. But this wasn't just architectural competition, it was branding warfare. Corporations and institutions vied for the tallest, most distinctive buildings, towers that would etch their names into the sky. Every new height was a headline, every silhouette a symbol. The skyscraper became the ultimate billboard, permanent, imposing, impossible to ignore. And beneath it all, the rhythm of progress beat relentlessly. Steam shovels dug foundations into granite. Riveters hammered steel day and night. Immigrants and iron workers balanced on beams hundreds of feet in the air with no harnesses, only grit and resolve. The skyline was no longer theoretical. It was real, and it was rising. As the 1920s roared through Manhattan, the skyline began to dance, not just climb. This was the era of Art Deco, a time when architecture wasn't only about height, but style. The Jazz Age poured elegance into steel and stone, and New York's buildings became icons of movement, light, and energy. The most dazzling of them all was the Chrysler Building, completed in 1930. It stood 146 feet tall, briefly becoming the tallest building in the world. It's commissioned by car magnate Walter Chrysler. The tower wasn't just a monument to corporate success. It was a symphony of design. Stainless steel spire, built in secret and hoisted into place overnight, shimmered in the sun like a crown. Ornamental eagles, modeled after hood ornaments, jutted from the corners like guardians of the future. With its curves, chevrons, and machine-age detailing, the Chrysler Building didn't just scrape the sky. It seduced it. But the race wasn't over. It's just a few blocks away. Another titan was rising. It's the Empire State Building, completed in 1931 during the depths of the Great Depression. Soared to 1,250 feet, stealing the title from Chrysler and holding it for nearly 40 years. Built in just 410 days, with thousands of workers laboring through wind, snow, and steel dust, the Empire State wasn't just a building, it was a message. New York endures, while much of the country struggled. Manhattan pushed upward, and its buildings mirrored the era's dual identity. It's elegant, but aggressive, optimistic, yet competitive. The Art Deco style captured the contradictions of the time, geometric but graceful, modern but steeped in myth. Towers weren't just functional, they were sculpted, glowing at night like beacons of possibility. And yet, beneath all that glitter, there was purpose. These skyscrapers were built by barons and moguls who wanted more than profit. They wanted legacy, a permanent place in the skyline and in history. By the end of the 1930s, Manhattan's silhouette had taken shape. The The city was no longer just a capital of finance. Okay? It was a cathedral of ambition. Okay? A skyline that didn't whisper progress. It shouted it. After World War II, Manhattan's skyline entered a new phase, one less ornamental, more corporate. The elegance of Art Deco gave way to glass, steel, and straight lines. America was now a global superpower, and New York was the front office of that empire. The skyline adapted accordingly, not with decorative spires, but with monuments of efficiency. In 1952, the United Nations headquarters rose on the East River, a bold, boxy glass tower, flanked by low marble wings. It marked a shift in tone, global, diplomatic, futuristic. It wasn't just a building. It was an architectural statement about international order in the atomic age, and it set the tone for what would follow. The Lever House in 1952 and the Seagram Building in 1958 marked a new chapter in architecture, both standing as defining examples of the international style. Their curtain walls of reflective glass and steel frames were stripped of ornament, free from sentiment. These towers were not cathedrals or castles. They were machines, precise, modern, and ruthlessly functional. Among them, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe's Seagram Building proved especially influential. Its bronze-tinted glass, disciplined grid, and expansive plaza projected a new kind of authority, one that rejected flourishes and instead embodied order, restraint, and power. This was corporate architecture at its height, cold, beautiful, and commanding. As American business flourished, so did the skyline. Midtown Manhattan became the fortress of corporations, banks, media giants, and law firms. Okay, these towers did not compete in ornamentation. Okay, they competed in square footage, location, and visibility on the horizon. Gone were the days of spires and gargoyles. Okay. In their place rose mirrored monoliths, synonymous, gleaming giants reflecting not only the clouds, but the ambitions of Wall Street itself. Yet even in their silence, these structures spoke volumes. They told of a nation obsessed with efficiency, expansion, and modernity. They became the visual language of corporate America, shaping skylines across the globe. Skyline was still a symbol, but now it whispered power instead of shouting beauty. By the late 1960s, New York was already a vertical masterpiece, but the city still dared to dream higher. That dream took shape at the southern tip of Manhattan, where two identical towers would forever transform the skyline. Bold, divisive, and unlike anything the world had seen before, they became the twin towers of the World Trade Center, conceived as a hub of global commerce and overseen by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Architect Minoru Yamasaki's vision was radical in its simplicity. Vertical lines, aluminum cladding, no setbacks. Each tower would soar over 1,600 feet, dwarfing everything around it. The ambition went beyond architecture. It was a statement of global reach, a modern temple of capitalism. Construction began in 1966. To make way, the bustling neighborhood of Radio Row was demolished. Engineers then faced one of the era's greatest technical challenges, building deep into Manhattan's soft riverbed. Their solution, the slurry wall, became a marvel of engineering, holding back the Hudson River while foundations were carved. By the time the towers were completed in 1973, reactions were mixed. Critics found them cold or box-like, lamenting the loss of ornate skyscrapers from the past, but others saw strength, presence, and confidence. Unlike the Chrysler Building's gleaming spire or the Empire State's graceful taper, the Twin Towers stood resolute twin pillars of scale and certainty. More than architecture, they became icons, symbols of business, ambition, and America itself. Millions flocked to their observation decks, dined at windows on the world, or simply marveled from the plaza below. For nearly 30 years, they anchored Lower Manhattan, granting it symmetry and gravitas. Even as taller buildings rose elsewhere, none carried the same symbolic weight as those two towers standing side by side. But on September 11th, 2001, that skyline changed forever, by construction, but by devastation. In less than 2 hours, the twin towers collapsed into fire, dust, and twisted steel. Thousands of lives were lost. The attack was more than destruction of buildings. It was an assault on symbols themselves: commerce, modernity, ambition, and freedom. For decades, the towers had defined New York's silhouette. Suddenly, that familiar outline was broken, replaced by absence. Photographs looked hollow. The city's heartbeat fractured. The site was renamed Ground Zero, a scar at the island's edge. For the first time in a century, Manhattan was not building upward, it was grieving. In the days that followed, Lower Manhattan became a place of mourning. Where once there had been height and light, there was silence, smoke, and sorrow. Firefighters, steelworkers, police, and volunteers filled the ruins, not to construct, but to recover. Rubble was cleared, lives were honored, and silence replaced the clang of progress. In a city known for constant momentum, this was a forced pause, a collective breath of grief. Yet, even in mourning, New York did what it had always done. It looked upward. The conversations about rebuilding were complicated, painful, and deeply human. Political. What should take the place of the towers? Should anything rise again? Could the skyline be restored without erasing the loss? For years, the hole in the ground remained, a reminder of what was and what was taken. It became sacred space. And yet, slowly, plans emerged. Designs were drafted. Cranes returned. Steel returned. Not to erase the tragedy, but to create something new beside it. Before anything was built, one truth stood clear. The skyline was no longer just a symbol of power or ambition. It had become a memorial, a silhouette shaped by both triumph and tragedy. And the story wasn't over. In the aftermath of devastation, a city known for speed, ambition, and movement paused, not to surrender, but to reimagine. Rebuilding the Manhattan skyline after 9/11s wasn't just a matter of architecture. It was a matter of identity. What would rise in place of the Twin Towers? Could anything? The answers came slowly. In 2003, a design by architect Daniel Liboskin was selected for the new World Trade Center site. It wasn't just about height. It was about healing, memory, and renewal. The plan would blend commercial space with public memorials, parks, transportation, and light. It wasn't a return to what had been. It was a statement of what could be. At the heart of it all stood a new tower, One World Trade Center, originally called the Freedom Tower. Rising from the northwest corner of Ground Zero, it would become the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere at 1,776 feet, a number chosen to echo the year of America's independence. But this wasn't just about patriotism. It was about defiance, about reaching up again despite loss. Its construction began in 2006, and in 2014, One World Trade Center opened its doors, clad in shimmering glass and standing like a crystal obelisk. It didn't try to imitate the past. It offered something new, reflection, both literal and symbolic. The building changes with the sky, glowing, darkening, disappearing, depending on the light. It is presence without arrogance. Beside it, the 9/11's memorial, opened in 2011. Two deep voids where the original towers once stood, each with a continuous waterfall and the names of the fallen etched into bronze. It's not just part of the skyline, it's part of the city's soul. The new skyline took years to take shape. The towers rose, 3 WTC, 4 WTC, and 7 WTC, each one sleek, modern, and purposeful. Together, they represent not just a city rebuilt, but a city transformed. New York didn't just replace what was lost, it evolved. It honored the past while building for the future. And in doing so, it reminded the world of something deeply American and deeply human. You can knock a city down, but you can't keep it from rising. Today, The Manhattan skyline is more than a collection of buildings. It is a living symbol of ambition, of resilience, of the American dream itself. No other silhouette in the world carries so much weight. It's etched into pop culture, history, and memory. You can draw it with 5 lines, and people will recognize it instantly. It tells a story of bold engineers and fearless ironworkers, of architects who imagined spires that pierced clouds, and of immigrants who crossed oceans to help build them. It speaks of risk, reward, and reinvention. The constant churn of New York itself has never been finished, and it never will be. The skyline is alive, always changing. In recent years, it stretched even higher, but not in Lower Manhattan. This time, the vertical race moved uptown. Along Billionaire's Row, super slender residential towers like 432 Park Avenue, Central Park Tower, and 111 West 57th Street now rise like needles above Midtown. These skyscrapers are feats of engineering, pencil-thin, wind-disted, and made for the ultra-wealthy. Critics call them sky-piercing expressions of inequality. Others see them as marvels of modern ambition. Meanwhile, in Hudson Yards, an entirely new neighborhood has appeared with gleaming glass towers, public art, and corporate headquarters rising where rail yards once sprawled. The skyline now stretches farther west, evolving with the city's changing needs and ambitions. But even as New York grows, its skyline refuses to let go of its history. The Empire State Building still shines through the night. The Chrysler Building still catches the first light of dawn, and One World Trade Center rises with quiet strength. Together, they remind the world of what once was, while pointing boldly toward what comes next. More than any statue or memorial, the skyline is New York's true monumentan, ever-changing silhouette of resilience. Each tower is a reflection of millions of lives stacked in steel and glass, built through eras of prosperity, hardship, war, and renewal. The skyline doesn't just outline the city's edge, it outlines possibility. Here, dreams are measured in floors, not boundaries. Because in Manhattan, the sky isn't a limit at all. It's just the beginning.